All right, let's dive in. Today, we're talking about archaeology, how we piece together the incredible story of humanity. And we're going to start with a number that, honestly, it might just blow your mind. Okay, so get this, 99%. Just let that sink in for a second. That is how much of the human story has zero written record. Everything you learned in history class, ancient Rome, the Renaissance, even what happened last week, that's all just 1%. It's barely a footnote in our entire time on Earth. So that leads to a pretty huge question, right? If there are no books, no diaries, no tweets for 99% of our history, how on earth do we read that story? Well, that's where archaeology comes in. Now, if you're picturing Indiana Jones, you gotta forget that for a minute. Archaeology isn't really about treasure hunting. At its core, it's a science. It's the careful study of all the stuff people left behind. Their tools, their houses, even their trash. And looking at the environment they were in to figure out who they were and what their lives were like. And no matter where an archaeologist is digging, whether it's in a desert or deep in a jungle, they're all basically trying to answer the same four big questions. These questions are really the engine that drives the whole field. And it all follows a pretty logical path. First, you have to figure out the basics. What happened, where did it happen, and when? That's your culture history. Once you've got that timeline, then you can start digging into how people actually lived their day-to-day lives. And only after that can you really tackle the big why questions. Why did they start farming? Why did their culture change? And all the while, you're also asking this other crucial question. How did any of this stuff even survive for us to find in the first place? I love this way of putting it. Thinking of an archaeologist as a detective, it's the perfect analogy. The past is basically this giant cold case, a massive crime scene, and their job is to show up, gather the evidence, analyze all the clues, and piece together what really went down. Okay, so if our archaeologist is a detective, what's in their toolkit? What are they actually looking for when they show up to the crime scene of the past? So the evidence at a site pretty much breaks down into four categories. Let's imagine an ancient campsite, okay? That arrowhead someone made, that's an artifact. The leftover animal bones from dinner, those are eco-facts. They tell you what was on the menu. The fire pit itself, which you can't just pick up and move, that's a feature. And any leftover bits of the hut they built, that's the structure. Every single one is a vital clue. So how do these sites even get created in the first place? Well, they don't just pop into existence. They're formed in two main ways. Sometimes it's all about what people did. We call those cultural processes. Building a town, throwing out their garbage, things like that. But other times, nature takes over. Think about a volcano burying a city like Pompeii. That's a natural process. And most of the time, it's a mix of both that creates the amazing puzzle we get to find today. All right, so when it's time to actually dig, our detectives have two main moves. The best way to think about a site is like a layer cake. If you want to see all the layers stacked on top of each other through time, you do a vertical excavation. It's like cutting a big slice of that cake. But if you want to see what was happening across one single layer at one specific moment, say the layout of an entire village, then you do a horizontal excavation. You're basically clearing off the frosting to see the whole top of the cake at once. Okay, so finding the clues is a huge part of the job. But here's the thing. A cool artifact without a date is, well, it's just a cool old object. To really understand the story, you have to know when things happened. And figuring that out has led to some seriously clever science. When it comes to dating, there are really two main types. The first is relative dating, which is pretty simple. It just tells you if object A is older than object B. But the real game changer is absolute dating. This is the gold standard because it uses science to pin down an actual calendar date or a specific age. And archaeologists have a whole bunch of these absolute dating tools. For example, want to know how old a bone is? You use radiocarbon dating. It works on anything organic up to about 50,000 years old. What about wood? Dendrochronology, or tree ring dating, can sometimes tell you the exact year a tree was cut down to build a house. And for dating our super ancient ancestors, like millions of years ago, you'd use something like potassium-argon dating on the volcanic rock found around them. Different tool for every job. Okay, so we can find sites, we can dig them up, we can figure out how old things are. Great. But that all leads to the biggest question of all, right? The so what question. Why does any of this old stuff actually matter to us right here, right now? At the end of the day, studying the past is really about studying ourselves. It's about answering that fundamental question, how did we get here? When we look at ancient societies, we can see the origins of things we still deal with today, like war or social inequality. We can look at civilizations that failed and hopefully learn from their mistakes so we don't repeat them. And, it's a powerful reminder that no matter how different we seem, we're all part of one big human story, a shared heritage that's absolutely worth protecting. And that effort to protect our shared story, it's a global thing. It's coordinated by UNESCO through their World Heritage Program. And just look at the numbers. We're not talking about just a few famous pyramids or castles. This is a huge worldwide network of over 1,000 sites, both cultural and natural. It's a recognition that our story belongs to all of us, no matter where we live. This really brings home that global passion for the past. I mean, check this out. As of 2020, Italy, the home of the Roman Empire, was tied with China, one of the oldest civilizations on the planet, for the most World Heritage Sites. What does that tell you? It tells you that this drive to connect with and preserve our history is something fundamentally human. It crosses all cultures. This really says it all, doesn't it? The past isn't dead and buried. It's not even past. It's more like the root system that's feeding our world right now. All those decisions, all those inventions from thousands of years ago, they're baked into our modern life. They shape our language, our technology, everything. The past is absolutely alive. So I'll just leave you with this thought to chew on. As we keep digging into that huge 99% of our unwritten story, what else is out there? What lessons are still buried under our feet that could actually help us build a better future? The answers are out there, just waiting for us to find them. Thanks for digging in with me today.